And now, please welcome Mandiant CEO, Google Cloud, Kevin Mandia.
Good. Followed it up. I would like to welcome everybody to MWise 2023. Got the year right. That was the first thing I had to get right today. The other thing I want to do is recognize who's in this room right now. We have the security operators that protect the most important industries, the most important organizations, the most important nations on the planet. And I want to thank all of you for the job you do. I opened up this conference now for 10 years, and I've always said that security is a calling. It is a mission. It is in your blood. I want to welcome the midshipmen over there. Hello, folks in white. It's good to see you. Now I'm looking out for the Air Force folks, and well, I'm one of them. Hey, hence the blue tie and the haircut. Today I'm going to talk about three things because that's actually what the Air Force taught me back in the 90s. Had three main points. It's the marketing of threes. I'm going to tell you what those are, and then I'm going to talk about them for 27 minutes. First and foremost, I want to talk about our need for layer 2 defense. That we were started at Mandia on the premise that prevention would eventually fail. And layer 1 defense has always been you have to identify your assets and then protect them. Layer 2 has always been, well, something bad happened, we got to detect, respond, and contain. So you're going to hear me talk about the Mandiant difference, how we want to detect and respond and contain better against the apex attacker. Then you're going to hear me talk about how AI, in my opinion, gives a greater advantage to the defender than to the offense because of the way it will eliminate toil and eliminate the fact that we're being overwhelmed on the defensive side of the ball. And then third, I want to talk about how we continue the private and public sector progress that we've made so that we can all be a part of having nations respond to cyber threats really in a coordinated way. So let's get on with this. And that was my thank you. And here's my agenda, and you'll see that and go, wait, he already said his three main points. Aren't we done already? Nope. We're going to continue. And I wanted to show you one of the first slides we ever made at Mandiant. It just looks a little bit different than when I first did this. We started the company in 2004, and the first theme was actually, you cannot solely rely on preventative measures. And then someone who knew grammar said, it's not preventative, it's preventive measures. For those of you that need a takeaway, there's your grammar takeaway of the day. It's preventive. So we thought that didn't have a marketing ring, so we came up with cybersecurity breaches are inevitable. Don't be a headline. But the rationale behind it, I believe, has proven true in the last 20 years. That IT proliferates and our adoption of it proliferates faster than our means and capability to secure it, period. It's just a fundamental law. Last night, talking to my CISO, he's like, you gotta stop saying cybersecurity breaches are inevitable. It's demoralizing for CISOs. Okay, fine. Somehow in the last 20 years, the word breach has sort of taken on a different definition. I'll buy that. So I changed our mission just now to the following. Prevention failures are inevitable. Someone's gonna get a beachhead into our networks because of those reasons that IT proliferates faster. And there's more reasons than just that. So we're going to go through this. But I wanted to establish the need for modern defense. To me, we are up against this now, what I call the apex attacker. These are the folks that do get beyond your preventive measures. So what do we do about it? This is the next evolution of cybersecurity that we should all be concentrating on. We've all done, for the most part, identify our assets. We're all thinking, how do we protect? And I've said for years, if you have $1 to spend, we're spending 90 cents on identify and protect and 10% on detect, respond, contain. However, that ratio can change over time. When I showed this slide, the best example of this, and you'll hear about it at this conference, and we should all leave here with better ways of doing layer 2 security, meaning, again, that's not the OSI layer or TCP IP layers. I'm talking layer 1, you're protecting. Layer 2, you're responding. It's rapid detection. We should all get better at it. But the best example that you'll hear over the next 2 days is the innovation we're seeing out of China in the last 24 months. You know, I've been kind of tracking all the TTPs from attackers since the late 90s. And we had over a 20-year run where attackers out of Russia were at the apex. They were the ones that we always said, there's the A game, that's the varsity squad. And from about 2004 till today, on a daily basis, we at Mandiant have had a front row seat to the Chinese capability and their threat actors as well. And I'll tell you, in 2022, they were the varsity squad. They were the ones that out-innovated the other nations that we constantly respond to. You'll hear about the big four. I kind of think big five. There's China, there's Russia, there's Iran, there's North Korea, and there's cyber criminals. And right now, the best innovation and the apex attacker that you're up against in a lot of ways is right behind me on the board. And we're going to go through how you set up a defense against them. And for a lot of you, if you're at a small to medium company, you have to focus on the fundamentals. That's fine. That's where everything starts. But the first thing that I've seen with great cyber defense is you recognize the advantage. You know more about your networks and more about your business, more about your systems, more about your applications, more about your customers than the adversary knows, or you should. And that's a good starting point. And then modern cyber defense requires these fundamentals. And you have to do them before you can get really good, in my opinion, at the next stage. So when you look at these, the first one's really patch management and attack surface management. What do we have on the internet? What's exploitable from the internet? Constant awareness of those things. Getting visibility is the key to any defense. If you can't see it, you can't defend from it. You don't even know your state of cybersecurity if you can't see your logs, both network security monitoring, EDR capability, as well as application logging, all in a co-located place. Privileged account management, you can read the slide, multi-factor auth, red teaming your network to make you do things, and trying to get the zero trust out there. But then we go beyond that. You've done the fundamentals and you're still being compromised. And most of the headlines that we read, I do think, people blame misconfigurations, people blame the defenders for some reason, but the reality is I think we're up against apex attackers that are taking advantage of the asymmetry between offense and defense. So the programs that do best do protect what matters most. And many of you will say, well, Mandia, that's boring. That's security 101. It is. The problem is a lot of people lose sight of that when they're chasing governance and risk. Literally, the first thing you have to do is know what customers matter most, what business processes matter most, what applications matter most, what employees matter most, and build systems and custom detections that protect them maybe better than everything else that you have. So it always starts with that. And then I could probably consume the next 9 slides I'm going to show you with one slide. I could say this: build a defense that assumes breach. But instead, I'm going to step you through all the different ways that prevention ultimately fails. I think you should assume, if you're a defender, it's the right mindset to have, that your employees will fall for a social engineering attack, period. Just assume it. Unless you hire a bunch of mean people that don't want to help anybody, you will fall victim to social engineering as a company. So you have to build defenses around that. And I guess I'll give you 2 before we move on to this one. One is this: when you have social engineering, to me, that's spear phishing. So you do want to educate your folks on spear phishing and recognize that the win when you spear phish all of your employees isn't that the spear phish didn't work, although you might get there. If you spear phish 100 employees every 90 days, in general, the spear phish, the end user will click on a link or they will open the file. That's okay. You should assume the ruse will work. What you want to see is one of the humans that got the spear phish reports it. That's the critical thing. All right. And the second thing is this: just based on the attacks that you might be reading about today, you'll hear more about in this conference. For any of you that allow one-time authentication based on phone calls, that's bad. And one-time passwords based on SMS texting, you're going to have to change your practices. And we'll be elaborating on that through the conference. Second thing is assume a 0 day. And a 0 day is an attack that has no patch. And from 1998 to about 2018, we saw about 10 to 15 of these in a wild every year. And that was it. And then in 2019, we saw 32 and went, whoa, that was a bunch. We saw 30 in 2020, then 81 0 days used in the wild in 2021, 55 0 days used in 2022, and we are at 63 so far this year. Now, here's the positive note on that. Well, it's hard to break in, so people need 0 days. But here's the other connotation to that statistic. These attacks will work on your network if you're running the software that's vulnerable. There is no patch. So you need the layer 2 defense I'm talking about. You need to detect what comes after the beachhead into your networks. The second thing that's probably good news, well, it's at least a lesson learned, is we are all adopting technology faster than we ever have in the past. Someone could write an application today, and it may have 100 million users 6 months from now. And it's hard to put duct tape over that when you're an enterprise CISO and that some of that technology co-joins the commercial world with the enterprise. So you assume 0 days, and I put at the edge because there's a whole bunch of VPN software or firewall software or router software that's been targeted because the threat actors recognize there's no EDR or endpoint detection and response software running on those types of devices. It's a pretty nice way, if I want to break into your network and be surreptitious, hacking the firewall is a great start. And we've responded to breaches where firewall is the beachhead and then straight into valid creds and lateral movement. Hard to detect that. You have to assume credential loss, which means on the layer 2, and I do have a slide that says all the layer 2 stuff at the end. You want to assume credential loss. You want to have detections around anomalous logons and lateral movement, period. You're not going to have, you will have end users that use the same passphrase for every third-party app they use. I'm sort of one of them, but I have multiple levels of security. I have the throwaway password on sites I'm never going to ever again. Then I have really good passwords. AWS is different than my Gmail password, different than my enterprise password, and they're all different. Different than my passwords to get on devices. Assume, and this is something I've tried to explain for 20 years and I failed, but I haven't given up, so I'm going to spend 1 minute on it, and then you can tell me if I blew it again. I believe this: whenever we buy security technology, it's the shiny object. We get a bunch of people, we implement it right, we give it a lot of attention, love, and affection, we care for it, we deploy it. 7 years later, it's wildly ineffective, and we've forgotten we even deployed it. The efficacy of our security safeguards wanes over time. And this is one of those things where I always get, on the victim side, the victims are responding to an incident going, how did we get compromised? Oh, we had a misconfiguration. The misconfigurations happen over time because it's so complicated to maintain software over the course of years, employee changes, and really just a dynamic business that changes, and you go from maintaining this to maintaining these other 3 things, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, we had a secret server over here that we were using to do identity management. Now all of a sudden we're over here using a different system. It happens almost everywhere, and so we have to recognize misconfigurations are prone to happen based on this drift, and what you were secure from yesterday as you don't maintain software. Most of the security controls, when you put them out there, over the years you're actually punching holes in them. Some end user came over the use case, you're like, we got to let that through, we got to let this through. So it just wanes over time. There's a security mindset that I see at the best security companies. There's so many different ways to explain this that this is actually a 27-minute dialogue. But I'm going to cut it down to, like, if you want to know which company you're at, the one with the right security mindset or one that needs improvement, I would say if you have not done a tabletop exercise with executives and or board members in the last 2 years, I would do one. Because that to me is a sign that you do not ordinarily have the right morale and security program if you don't have board and executive buy-in, period. It starts there. And the best way for me to witness that, when I meet a CISO and they're like, I'm not sure my executives get it, I'll go, did you do a tabletop exercise in the last year? Nope. Do one. And you should absolutely do a scenario based on worst case scenario. It's feasible, it's possible, could happen to us, and we really hope it doesn't. That's the exact scenario you want to do so that you get to know what communication channels need to be open, who do you need to tell, what do you need to tell them, and who are the real active combatants in your incident should one occur. That's one way to tell the security mindset. Here's another one. If you can red team your network, and let's imagine the red team is successful. They emulate an Apex attacker, they break in. If you have management that goes, that's great, what is the results of the red team? The results are we didn't detect this and this. Okay, let's build controls around that. Let's buy what we need. Let's build process. That's a good response. If you have an executive management team that goes, well, I don't know. It's probably not going to happen. Probably not the right security mindset on the red team. But I do know this, based on security mindset, it brings me to this next thing. we've talked to enough CISOs in the last few years, that I've gotten my mind around security burnout. So I decided to mention it briefly. When I was doing log review at the Pentagon in 1993 in uniform, nobody really asked me, hey, how do you feel and are you burned out? However, I do recognize times have changed since 30 years ago in the military. And it is real that people are overwhelmed. They don't feel that they have a role or remit that's respected. They may not see upward mobility, but I really think the biggest things causing burnout is in fact a feeling of that they're inefficient, that they're going through log files all day long, they're looking for things, and they're stuck in the toil of something that's omnipresent and pressure. If you think about the cyber defender, I've used this analogy a lot. We are playing goalie, and the attacker has unlimited penalty kicks at you. You're diving left and blocking the ball, diving right and blocking the ball. And the only time you get noticed is when the goal happens and somebody's like, hey, how come you didn't make the save? And that's a tough way to do things. And that brings me to my last topic that I'll get to in 2 slides. But I wanted to sum up layer 2 defense in 1 slide. Assume breach, then do this following. Make sure you have clear 100% visibility on all the networks that you own, period. Make sure you have network coverage of them. Make sure you have endpoint coverage of them. Make sure you have application logging coverage of them. If you need custom detection that matters, almost every impactful breach we've ever seen, there's lateral movement using valid credentials, and there's the use of PowerShell. So you create custom rules for your network based on where PowerShells may be permitted, where it shouldn't be permitted. All right, and all these things, I was talking to our CISO last night, and he said we have over 3,000 custom rules just protecting the Mandiant portion of the Google network, looking for things that are in these categories. So there is a means to, regardless of the efficacy of the next 0-day that's probably coming out today or tomorrow, there's the means to be 5 minutes behind that 0-day and diminish the impact of any beachhead of prevention failure. Honey tokens are a great idea because that is literally just starting accounts that nobody uses, but they're usable and they have access. It's basically a honey net so that any use of any of these accounts is in fact signs that you have an adversary on your network. Understanding your prime targets is going right back to protecting what matters most, and then red team your network with what I call apex attacker aware folks. And that's really it. I mean, we are all working identify and protect, and those are critical steps. We are now ready as cyber defenders to say, and let's plan for prevention failure. And many of you in the room say, we already do that. That's great. Help those that haven't, and we got to diminish the toil. But when looking at what's next, I wanted to get to this and spend more time on this, where I do think artificial intelligence is absolutely going to help take this huge asymmetry where one attacker literally can watch movies 5 days a week and eat popcorn, and then over the weekend create work for 2 million defenders. One person can do that. That's a pretty asymmetric thing. We're going to crunch that based on what AI can do, which is address this problem, that we have teams trying to do too much. There are some folks that say security operations is 37 different unique tasks. I've heard another, I think it was MITRE that came up, there's 41 different things that are involved in security operations. I don't know of any team that can do all 41 well, or all 35 well, depending on how you want to look at it. But we're all trying to we're getting more data, we're getting more malware, there's more 0-days, there's more threat groups, there's more, there's literally access brokers selling access to victim networks, more ransomware groups, more money being made. It's just more, and more. And the only thing coming is a way to reduce the toil with large language models and the shift change that AI is going to bring. So I wanted to share with you the Kevin Mandia, here's what I think is going to come out of some of the new innovations that are possible with large language models and AI. You can read the slide. We will address understanding the threats and safeguarding against them faster. We'll reduce the workload, and we'll upskill people faster with AI. But here's just a couple ideas. I'm going to go to the second one first because I lived it. Whenever I did investigations responding to breaches, it dawned on me, I think I spent 75% of my time making PowerPoint and Word documents, not deep dive forensics. Imagine if you're an investigator and you show up and you go, listen, I'm just going to deep dive, which is the real skillful art, find every fingerprint of the attacker, fully understand their TTPs, Well, the document's actually almost getting generated for you. You don't spend 9 hours wordsmithing a paragraph because you know plaintiff attorneys or defense attorneys are going to review every word you write in a investigative report. Imagine the scale and scope and the avoidance of burnout when you can do that. And we're already going to look for ways to do those sort of things. The first bullet is about having what we call it in the Air Force, the heads-up display. If you could be reviewing log files or data coming from endpoint sensor or network sensor, and you're immediately seeing intel that would include what Mandia knows about something, what Google knows about something, what Palo Alto Networks knows about something, what CrowdStrike knows about something, and it's all synthesized for you. No longer doing a search and reading 27 PDFs. You simply get, here's who we think this is, here's other indicators to look for, popping up in a window. That creates, A, makes a tier 1 analyst like a tier 3 analyst, and B, saves a ridiculous amount of time. Intelligence gathering, meaning we're always trying to scour on the internet. Are there new vulnerabilities, new victim companies? Is there anything in the dark web we need to worry about? There's ways to use AI and models to get that. Detecting disinformation is a big one, because when people say, where does AI maybe help the offense? Probably in social engineering and probably a little bit in disinformation, but we're going to use it to actually detect artificial amplification of messages that doesn't seem natural. Try to pierce anonymity behind the source of different things to prove it is disinformation based on the source. So you can read the slide for yourself. And I guess I like the last one too. Even malware review can take days to figure out what malware does. It's pretty nice to get the first synthesis through a model and say, hey, look, it opens up a port, it does have a listener, it does use encryption, this is the type of encryption it uses, and it touches 4 other different files that are config files for it, or whatever it might be, or here's the C2 for it. When you get that quickly, and then you also can go through your whole malware database and figure out, hey, it's probably these folks, and here's the attribution. These are very, very helpful things. So during this conference, be pinging the folks here how they're using AI already, but all of our jobs as defenders will change very fast and frequently over the upcoming years based on this. And then being in DC, I have to get to this point, because we've been pushing this at every MWise conference back when we called it MirrorCon in 2010, a decade ago, and we called it the Cyber Defense Summit, because we recognize that securing the cyber domain is absolutely team ball between private sector and public sector. And so standing here today, I've witnessed the evolution in nationwide defense and how to coordinate. And we're always getting better, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to call all of us to action to maintain the progress that we have. In the private sector, I recognize we always have to be looking for software that helps us identify and protect better. We always have to do secure by design. We have to be working very hard to make sure we tell people you have misconfigurations. You're not following best practices. You may have a vulnerability in your network. We got to shore up playing goalie better, and we get that. And then on the public side of the house, the government side, the progression I've seen is the first thing that you have to do in cyberspace is secure government agencies, which I think as a nation we've already done that. There are other nations that we work with that are still on that journey. Second thing is you get to a point where we can secure government, and now we even have intel and capability to share with systemically important entities in our nation or critical infrastructure, whatever lingo you want to use, and work with them to do things. And then I think a third thing that would be great to see is the ability to hold countries or people accountable. So as the private sector plays goalie all the time, we need the public sector and the government to be the offense, meaning hold and make risks and repercussions possible for those who are compromising our networks. Because a lot of the compromises we are responding to, it's real hard to stop them. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it feasible to stop every attack all the time before impact? In theory, yes. In operation and practice, not really. So risks and repercussions will be critical to that story, and we've got to work as a team. So what can each of us do at this conference? In summation, great at layer 2, prevention fails, defense. Second thing, learn AI, lean into it, and use it to scale your teams to avoid burnout and get far greater efficacy in your security programs. And 3, all of us remember that we're in this thing together to protect organizations. And if we share the information with the appropriate entities and hold each other accountable and push it upwards, I do think you can see a whole of nation response by our country as well as others. I want to welcome all of you for being here. It's going to be an intense couple of days. I'm excited right now to welcome the next speakers, our threat intelligence panel. So thank you very much.